Hello, everyone. Welcome to New Canaan Library. My name is Heather Cimino, and I coordinate adult programs here. And I'm so happy to see you all here this afternoon. So I'd like to start with a show of hands. How many people thought they would ever be coming to a library for a bourbon tasting? Oh, one person? Oh, two? Okay, good, good. Back in June of this year, our CEO tasked us with providing programs to our community and having people come that don't usually come to the library. And I think we did that. I see a lot of new faces. So this afternoon, we welcome bourbon expert and combat veteran Fred Minnick. Fred is here to tell us the gripping story of how he rebuilt his life while rising to whiskey stardom. Today, Fred's palate moves markets. The format for today is Fred's going to talk for a little while, and then we're going to hand out samples. It's going to be like an airplane. You have like flight attendants handing out your samples. And we'll do Q&A while we're handing out the samples, and then Fred will guide you through a bourbon tasting. So I want to thank Jeff Parrott from New Canaan's J. Earl and Sons. They're right down here on Main Street in New Canaan. He's back there. They are a newer store in New Canaan, and they would love your patronage. I also like to thank Elm Street Books for being here. They're selling books, and after the event, there will be a book signing. So with that, please help me welcome Fred Minnick.
Thank you very much. Well, it is my absolute honor to be here at New Canaan, the New Canaan Library. For those who didn't know how to pronounce this wonderful town, it's New Canaan, not New Canaan. So I screwed that up on a YouTube video recently, so my apologies for that. Show of hands, how many bourbon fans do we have in the house? Oh, wow, pretty much everyone. All right, who spends way too much money on bourbon? It change of hands there. I see some spouses next to them, so I saw the change in the voting. Okay, speaking of spouses, this is a real thing. Like, some people have an extra credit card that they hide from their significant others. You're safe here. Does anybody do that? Do you have an extra credit card? Not willing to admit it? That's all right. It's all right. Fortunately for me, my wife is a massive bourbon fan, and as you will read in the book, hopefully, she was a connoisseur long before I was. I've always been a bourbon drinker, okay? And there's a difference between being a bourbon drinker and a taster. We're talking drinking straight from the bottle, bourbon kind of drinker, you know what I mean? When I was in Iraq, I actually had bourbon bootlegged to me I had a friend pour out Listerine in the old Listerine bottles and pour bourbon into it, same color. So it passed the MP's inspection, which, by the way, any MPs in the house, former MPs? All right, good. Those, even after all these years of being in the military, they still scare me. Like, you know, I always wonder if I'm in trouble with the MPs. But anyway, she would send me bourbon and Listerine. I tell that story in the book too. But I've always been a bourbon fan. I absolutely love this world. I actually got a food sensitivity test. Anyone ever gotten those to find out what you're allergic to, right? Those are really thorough. And the report came back to like, listen, we don't know what you do in your life, but you know, if you're going to drink alcohol, whiskey is like made for your bloodline. You know, I was like, well, as a matter of fact, that's what I do. I drink whiskey. That was really cool when I got that food sensitivity test back. But anyway, it's a real pleasure to be here today. I love coming to libraries. This library is gorgeous. If you get a chance, you haven't been here before, walk around. There's three stories. You know, they've got like a cafe. You know, it's way different than most libraries you go to. It's gorgeous in here. And they have all these like books that I haven't seen in forever. So just incredible job. And they've got incredible computers and everything. So big round of applause to the New Canaan Library. This is just incredible. As you know, a former like wanting to be an author before I became an author. I used to always dream of being able to talk into libraries. Little did I know I'd mostly talk in bars. So, which is kind of a library for us, right? There's bourbons everywhere and everything. But the reason I wrote Bottom Shelf, it's 21 years of my life. This book is my heart and soul, and it tells the story of how I kind of came to be a taster. I was really reluctant to share this story because it's tied to coming home from Iraq and battling PTSD and going through therapy. And I was just really nervous about people thinking that I was trying to tell everyone in therapy to go drink alcohol. Real fear of mine. Well, during the pandemic, I lost my magazine, Bourbon Plus. I lost my event, Bourbon and Beyond. And so within like a week and a half, I lost like 90% of my income. And I had just started a YouTube channel to kind of like talk about, things. And the only way that I could earn a living during the pandemic, when we were all kind of like, locked up in the house, was to drink on live streams. So I would get on YouTube and I would taste bourbon, take questions, and these things would last for 3 hours, and I didn't know what I was doing, but man, was it a great time. And along that time frame, I told everyone how I became a taster. And the Today Show found out about it, and they said, we want to do a feature on you and like how you became a bourbon taster. Because Craig Melvin on the Today Show is a massive, massive bourbon fan. And he subscribes to my newsletter. He's been following me on Twitter. And so anything I ever said I liked, he would go buy it. So he was watching that live stream or something, and they reached out wanting to do a feature on me. I was really nervous about that. And I had to go through extra therapy just to prepare for it. Now, I was stunned at the reaction of people who saw that, and it was coming from the mental health community. I was really nervous that people are going to be like, "Why you out there promoting alcohol, going to make people with depression drink more, it's going to be bad." I was so nervous about that. And instead, I had psychiatrists and social workers tell me that I was helping people get into therapy by telling my story. And that gave me the courage to write this book. And it starts out in a very dark place. When I came home from Iraq in 2005, I had survived a very couple close calls, one of which an RPG landed in front of me and should have taken my life. And even though it's been all these years later and I have went through the various therapy sessions about it, that moment still hurts, but it doesn't hold on to me anymore. But I should not be here from what happened on June 24th, 2004. That RPG was a dud, and I was allowed to live a little longer. But when I got home, I didn't feel that way. I was hurting inside. Everywhere I went, I thought there might be a car bomb. I would see rooftops and think there were snipers on top of them. Everywhere there was a loud noise. I would duck under a chair. Even to this day, if I hear a loud noise, I'll jump. I mean, I can't help it. Like, it's just wired in me now. The difference is I no longer go into a depression afterward. When I came home, it was just so hard to readjust. I didn't know how to do it. And I thought my life was meaningless. I thought I shouldn't be here anymore. And I thought my wife would be better off without me. So I tried to take my life. And I'm glad to say that it didn't happen. And after that, I got help. I went to therapy in the Louisville VA, and it absolutely saved my life. The whole process was going through exposure therapy, and it was going through cognitive behavioral therapy, and it was doing everything that it could, my therapist was doing everything she possibly could to disconnect how I felt when something triggered me or bothered me and reminded me of Iraq. She was a miracle worker. And within 2 years of getting in therapy, I was transformed. I could hold a job. I could go out in public. I could stand in lines. I still got lost in parking lots, but I don't think that was the PTSD. I still, though, felt like I was going through the motions. I wasn't incredibly happy. There was just something missing in me that made me feel excited about life. And I was telling her about this. And even though I'm past this point of not going to jump off a bridge or put a stapler through my boss's head, which many people have told me that wasn't the PTSD either regarding that particular boss. They wanted to do the same thing. I was like, okay, well, I still think it might have been the PTSD anger issues. And I thought that I wasn't going to be homeless anymore. I was going to make it in this life, but I wasn't there. I wasn't happy. And she's like, well, you're a creative and you like to write and you're a foodie. Why don't we go down this path of mindfulness? And this mindfulness exercise started with a quarter. And any time that I would be offended or triggered by something, this was an immediate action. Hold the quarter in my hand, feel the quarter, the ridges around the quarter, George Washington's head, and just think about that, solely think about that quarter. And that will take your mind off of whatever's bothering you. And I'm telling you, it's powerful. Like if you've got a brother-in-law or someone who annoys you to death, just grab a quarter, hold it, and you're like, oh yeah, that's right. Just think about the quarter. It works in so many situations. In fact, if you ever see me and I might start doing something like that. That's me like saying, okay, I'm gonna be all right. If you feel the texture of something, it will take your mind off of an issue. And then it was aromatherapy. Now, I come from a long line of people who can smell really, really well. Like my mom's side of the family, we all have great noses. But I didn't really know this was a gift. I always got punished for smelling things. Because going back to like 4th grade, Chris was sitting in the back of class, and I'm at the front, and Chris farted, right? So he farted. I smelt it right up there at the front. Sorry, New Canaan Library. I know this is not the conversation you thought you were getting, but here we are with a fart joke. And I smell it, and I start ratting out Chris. And everyone blamed me, right? Because the smeller is the feller. That's how it is when you're a kid. And so for me, like, my nose was not always associated with good things. But she said, think about how you are, things that you are smelling. And the whole point was to keep you actively present in the moment. And she actually gave me this idea of like going into Whole Foods and just smelling all through Whole Foods, which there's not a greater place in the world that has so many different smells. One aisle you got patchouli, next aisle you got fish, then you got candles. I mean, there's just incredible scents all over Whole Foods or any kind of like cool grocery store. You just really smell a lot. Maybe even a farmer's market. You just smell so many cool things there. And that whole thing was just to keep my mind active and thinking about the present and what am I smelling. So then she's like, all right, the last part of this exercise is taste mindfulness. Now, as a foodie, I love tasting things. I loved all styles of food. And I'd later be like a judge for the James Beard Awards, like, sampling things in restaurants around the country and voting on them. but I've always been a massive foodie. I love food, but I couldn't really tell you, much about the tasting process. I loved it. And at the time, I was a wine and spirits journalist, covering the business side of things and how things were growing and what have you. So my foot was in the door in the bourbon side of things. But I'd be with master sommeliers and master distillers, and they'd be like, "Oh, I get black currant in this, yeah." And then, I remember like Chris Morris, the master distillers of Woodford Reserve, describing the 200 different flavors of Woodford Reserve. I could taste 5. Today it's 6. Kidding. It's 7. But I just, the whole flavor tasting thing wasn't connecting with me. But here we are in this therapy room, and she's like, "I want you to put this barbecue potato chip on your tongue and think about it." Now, I'm like, at this stage, I'm like, what are we doing here? I mean, this is a little weird. I'm going to be eating a chip in therapy. I'm supposed to be talking about my feelings. And I put the barbecue potato chip on my tongue because this woman had saved my life. She had given me the skills of surviving this new world. I trusted her. So I put the chip on my tongue, closed my eyes, and I chewed. I felt the salts and the sugars separate on my tongue. I could feel the crunch differently all over my tongue. For the first time in my life, I was actually tasting a barbecue potato chip. It completely wowed me. Now, the whole point was to connect my brain to my palate so I could actively think about what I was tasting versus a car bomb or a memory that I had. But something else happened there. I was like, holy cow, can I use this technique in tasting bourbon? That was one of my first thoughts. Now, there's not a therapist in the world that would say, "Hey, you know what's a good idea after this therapy session? Go home and drink bourbon." But that is what I did. I went home and I tried bourbon a little time after. Can anyone guess what bourbon that was? Let's see. See if we got any people who've been following me for a while. Just shout it out. Nope, not Old Crow. Old Forester, nope. It was Henry McKenna. Let's make sure he gets the door prize, which is it's actually nothing. We don't have a door prize, but do we have a door prize? No, sorry. Should have worked that out beforehand. It was Henry McKenna, and I tasted Henry McKenna, and for the first time, I was feeling it on my tongue differently. So prior to this, I had put something on my tongue, and I would just think about, what am I tasting? Is it caramel? Is it juicy fruit? Is it grapefruit? What is it? But this time, I wasn't trying to focus on the flavor. I was simply trying to see how it felt on my tongue, just like I did the barbecue potato chip. And I felt it differently when I changed my process of tasting, when I was trying to be mindful about where I was feeling it on my tongue. And then I tasted again, and I would focus on the part of the tongue I felt it most prominently, and then the flavors just started coming to me. Because what was happening is my brain was connecting to that part of my tongue, a lifetime of things I have tasted that had resonated in that particular taste bud area, and the flavors just popped up. So whenever you see me, reveal what could seem like an out there tasting note, like say marzipan, truth is, I have tasted that before, and that just was triggered in that moment. So the whole point of that exercise was to get me to actively think about being in the moment and distancing myself from my rack. But what would also happen is I would become a taster. And that was the moment where the taster me was born. Not long after that, I'm at a restaurant in Louisville called Bourbon's Bistro. Now, Bourbon's Bistro is an iconic restaurant. It's the first bourbon-related restaurant in Louisville. Opened in 2005, and the guy there named Jason Bronner comes out with this, he's having me taste all sorts of stuff, but he comes out with this really nice Old Crow chest piece. And it's got like a face on it. It's all, all ceramic-y. It looks like a cool thing you would put up on your fireplace. And he says, "Hey, taste this right here." And so he gives it to me. I put it on my tongue with my new taste mindfulness technique, and my body just like stopped. Like the whole world just stopped. I could feel it, like it covered every inch of my tongue. It dripped in underneath my jawline. It tickled the roof of my palate. It was absolutely insane, and to this day remains the greatest bourbon I have ever tasted. Now, those chest pieces are very inconsistent, so it depends on how they're stored. It depends on how the cork, whether the cork got dried out. I mean, you can taste one and it's not any good at all. And then there's also the fact that those ceramic vessels were made with lead. So I tested many of them. They never tested positive for lead. So fortunately, the doctor did tell me that you would have to drink a lot, like 2 of them, to get lead poisoning if they did contain lead. And he's like, by that point, you've killed your liver. So, at any rate, I only share that with you in case you go to the store, try to find one of these bottles. But I became obsessed with Old Crow after that. Now, I was still kind of a sophomore journalist, still new to the scene. I went to the store the next day to get a bottle of Old Crow. It was horrible. It sucked. Probably the worst bottle I had at that point. It was disgusting. 3-year-old rot gut Kentucky bourbon. 80 proof. Still what it is today. Bottom shelf, just completely ignored by the people who own it today. So I was like, man, what happened to this brand? And then I became really into finding out about the man it was named after, James C. Crow, who in all the history books and all the tours and anytime he was brought up was a doctor from the prestigious Edinburgh Medical College in Scotland, moved to America, became the most preeminent distiller in American history in the 1800s, was very, very important. Well, some of that was true. He was a legit distiller who made great whiskey, who was sought after, who greatly influenced the American whiskey scene. But, American whiskey has a tendency to lie. The marketing departments tend to make shit up and just spew all sorts of fake stories. That whole thing about James C. Crow not being a doctor, or not being a doctor, well, guess what? He wasn't a doctor. I found no record of him going to medical school, found nothing tied to him to being even in healthcare or doing anything remotely healthcare related here in the United States. He just made really great whiskey, and someone along the line said, he's a doctor. That's how whiskey marketing is. Whiskey marketing is full of so much shit. You cannot get past how much they make up on their labels. In one of my books, I said that whiskey marketers rival political ads for the amount of BS per square inch. And I don't even think it's a rivalry anymore. And we're in political season. And the whiskey world has always made up stuff. And the thing is the real stories are actually pretty cool and very, very true. But back to kind of how I really got into this, I became obsessed. And every single time that something negative would happen in my life, losing family members, going through very painful miscarriages with my wife. Every time I found something that would make me hurt, I would go research. I would bury my head in archives and libraries across the country and even the world and try to find out who James C. Crow was and what happened to Old Crow. So I would like to read you all. The book, I'll tell you, the book is a back and forth of my personal journey and Old Crow. And the reading I'm going to do for you is I'm putting my 2-month-old baby Julian to sleep, and I get a text that a very dear friend of mine and a friend to Minnie in here passed away. His name was Dave Pickerel. Dave was one of the most important distillers of our time. He consulted for all these new distilleries across the country. He was the founder of Whistle Pig, Hill Rock, and my favorite story to share is that we drank whiskey with Metallica backstage. He co-founded Blackened with Metallica. And let me tell you, I had a lot of great memories with Dave. And with that, I would like to do a reading from chapter 8 and kind of tell you a little bit about Dave and that time. After that, we are going to we'll take some questions and do a bourbon tasting. Which it's good they don't have the bourbon out yet right now, because usually people are like, when's this guy going to shut up and when can we drink, you know? So the bourbon is coming. Okay. If I shut this computer, will it turn it off? It will? All right, I'm going to move it a little bit. All right, hopefully I don't screw that up. Okay, so to recap again, this is at a point in my life where, you know, I'm through the weeds. I've kind of made it as a bourbon writer. I'm already I've got several books out by now. My wife and I got through the difficulties of trying to have children. We now have 2 kids, and I'm putting to sleep my 2-year-old. And I just found out that Dave Pickerel had passed away. He was the James Crow of modern distillers because of all the things he did for the industry, I said, hardly believing I was saying this out loud to my infant son. But he was so much more than a distillery builder. I won't ever forget him as a person. Oh, Mr. Dave was a character, Julian. He had a big, round belly, but still appeared athletic and had a handshake that could crack your knuckles. He also had a knack for stirring the pot. One time when he was starting a moonshine called Popcorn Sutton, named after the famous moonshiner, he told me they had no marketing budget. I stopped. Julian gazed at me with his reflective hazel eyes, seeming to enjoy the conversation. So I continued. Dave had this idea of copying the Jack Daniel's label. Not a little bit, like the whole thing. The font, size of the label, color and bottle size, everything. He completely ripped off Jack Daniel's, which, as you know, Julian, is the largest whiskey brand in the world. You can't go far without seeing Jack somewhere. Well, he did it. The Jack Daniel's lawyers wrote to him to cut it out. Dave didn't stop, and Jack Daniels straight up sued Dave and his partners of Popcorn Sutton. The lawsuit made all the newspapers, and Dave said, "That's how we launched the brand." Their lawsuit was our marketing. We pulled the bottle, which we always intended to do once they sued us, but you can't buy that kind of publicity. So the moral of the story here, Julian, never bet against Dave. Damn, I'm going to miss him. When I looked down, Julian was asleep, and my eyes sore. But I found myself wanting to tell Julian more. Not just about Dave, but about the other great distillers who meant so much to me. Jimmy Russell, Edwin Foote, Fred Noe, Chris Morris, Jim Rutledge, and so many others who helped me become who I am. And there was one distiller who I was with as he struggled through ALS. People may remember Parker Beam for his incredible golden palate and ability to make whiskey, or how he led Heaven Hill after the horrendous fire in 1996. Or maybe they'll think of the brand with his namesake, Parker's Heritage. But I'll remember the man as he fought to live, battling ALS. The courage it took for him to wake up every day, to ride his bike for as long as he could and remain active. Some may think that's not how he'd want to be remembered. But I'd argue I saw his strength when others saw a man on his deathbed. He never gave up and lived with ALS for 6 years. One after another, I shared the stories of people who've influenced me, outlining all the quirks of these folks, including Julian's godmother, the first female master taster, Peggy No Stevens. She's the reason I have a beard, you know, I said, noticing his eyes opened when he heard her name. Then I started telling him about the early distillers. In the late 1800s, one master distiller named Cyrus Noble made whiskey so good that a gold miner traded his mine for the whiskey. But the story of Cyrus is one of caution too, buddy, because he liked whiskey so much that he got drunk and fell into the mash tun. Another iconic fella, E.H. Taylor, was super important for passing the Bottled and Bond Act, and you can still find his name on bourbon bottles today with his picture. My favorite distiller of all time, Julian, is a guy named James C. Crowe. You know, he's the guy I said Mr. Dave was like, and Daddy's got a file so thick on this fella, I could fill your crib with papers. But I feel like I don't know nearly enough about him, or if I ever will. Julian's attention was entirely on me. At 2 months old, he had never seemed so focused. He squeezed my finger and cooed. Do you want more bourbon stories? He kicked, which was my answer for yes. You see, son, the industry has a long history of making stuff up, and the greatest distiller of all time was said to be a doctor. But neither I nor the past researchers could find evidence that Crowe was actually a doctor. The best theory is he learned some chemistry techniques here and there and put them to use when he moved to America. We do know for certain that his whiskey took off like wildfire, and that Old Crow was the greatest brand of the 1800s, and arguably the best quality of the 1900s. Then Jim Beam bought it in 1987 and turned it to poo-poo, I said, still trying to refrain from cussing around my kids, no matter the age, which, by the way, lasted for as long as Julian was in diapers. Once a soldier, always a soldier's mouth. I looked at Julian, his eyes closed now, and let him rest on my left pec. As I rocked, I thought about Dave, how whiskey events would never be the same without seeing him, his huge smile, and the legions of fans that came to learn from his massive distilling brain. I kissed Julian on the forehead and slowly laid him in the crib. The line between life and death is ever moving, so small. 1 minute we are here, the next we are gone. The loss of Dave, the love of my life, the birth of my boys, my passion for bourbon. They're all chained together in moments, bringing me to tears, laughter, and deep thought. I was putting my boy to bed, and a simple text about Dave's passing changed everything. As I left for Julian's room, walking down the stairs, I thought about how distillers live on in the brands they create. And I smiled, knowing that Dave Pickrell would never be forgotten, and that Parker Beam's legacy is sipped every day. It's like music. I never saw Jimi Hendrix in person, but his guitar is felt in my inner being. Distillers' recipes are their legacies, but this sentiment mattered little at the time. Dave's loss was also a reflection of us all in the whiskey business. He did not live a healthy life by any means, and I was walking the same path. I needed to lose weight, to exercise, to live to see my boys have their own kids, and to grow old with Jacqueline. I didn't sleep at all that night, And as I often did, I coped with anxiety by thinking about history, distillers past. My mind went to Old Crow. It always went back to Old Crow. What happened to this brand? And that is a little reading for you all from Bottom Shelf. Now, happy to take some questions. And by the way, when you get your bourbon, if you can wait we're not at a sorority or fraternity party. Looking at you too. She was totally going to take a shot, wasn't she? No? Yeah. Just hold it for us. I'd like to walk you all through the taste mindfulness exercise. You can do that for me. All right, thank you. But we'll go ahead and take some questions.
Before we do that, I'd like to just
Okay.
please ask everyone to give J. Earl and Sons a round of applause for sponsoring the tasting.
Heck yeah. Also, they're selling the bottles back there too, right? Down the street. No, I didn't hear. Okay. But you got other stuff you can sell here. Cool. Yeah, all the laws with alcohol, huge. Any alcohol cops in here, by the way? I usually start out asking that, and by law, you have to answer, so we're good. All right. Saw a few people scratching their heads. That means they're not alcohol cops, but they're cops. Just kidding. All right, any questions? Yes, sir.
Wait, hold on one second.
Oh, she's got a microphone. This is all getting recorded. So if you're not supposed to be here or with someone you're not supposed to be with, apologies for not telling you in advance, but let us know and we'll edit it out.
Could you give a little overview of how bourbon is made and what it's made out of?
Absolutely. Great question. So bourbon is a style of whiskey that must be predominantly corn. The law says it has to come from a fermented corn mash of at least 51%. So that means if it dips below 51% of the mash bill, meaning they'll have corn, rye, barley, corn, wheat, barley, or just any kind of cereal grain. They can use cereal grains for making bourbon. But it always has to be predominantly corn, okay? And then it's a fermented mash, so they're making beer, and they transfer that mash, meaning the solids are still there, and then they distill it. And when they distill it, it can't be distilled at any higher proof than 160. It's very important because vodka is coming off the still at 190 proof. So is ethanol, by the way. So when you drink vodka, you're not too far away from ethanol. Just remember that in terms of how it's made. So gas tank or vodka. That's basically what's going on with the creation of vodka. So you got, once it's off the still, they will add what they call proofing water to it. So, they'll just take water from the tap or from the stream. Usually, they'll distill it, or they'll do reverse osmosis with it, and they'll cut it, and then they'll put it into a barrel at no higher than 125 proof. Okay, so that barrel is what makes it unique in comparison to other styles of whiskey. Irish whiskey, Canadian whiskey, Scotch, all styles of whiskey that are different with grains and everything, but they go into used barrels. Bourbon must go into a new charred oak barrel every single time. So that is the big thing that separates bourbon from other styles of whiskey. After that, it goes into the warehouse. It has no age limit or minimum. So it just goes in there and it's pulled out when the distillers are ready to bottle it. The other thing is it must be made in the United States of America. That was declared in 1964 by Congress. So anytime people want to get on the United States Congress, I'm like, listen, they made bourbon a unique product of the United States. Give them some credit here, they're not always screw-ups. All right, great question, thank you. Yes, we got one right here at the front.
Okay, hold on. Coming.
What is your approach to doing your top 100? That just seems incredibly complicated.
It's very complicated. Yep. It is, last year was a lot different. than previous years. On average, I taste between 800 and 1,200 American whiskeys a year. Last year, because I was finishing up the book, and I about went blind, so I had to have a bunch of surgeries on my eyes. I was taken off the tasting circuit for a minute, so I only tasted 600 in comparison to other years. But if you think about it, there was 20,000 new whiskeys last year, from labels. Most of them were single barrels, but that's a lot. If I'm one of the more busy tasters out there and I'm only tasting 600, think of all the stuff I missed. So it is complicated. I rely heavily on my spirits competition, the Ascot Awards, and things that I take. People send me stuff. I'll taste it. I'll be out and about. I'll taste it, and I just try to taste and log it if something is really special to me. But it is chaotic, and I'm trying to figure out a more efficient way to do it. So hopefully this year it'll be a little bit more dialed in. Now when I get the 100 down, over the course of 2 weeks, I'll taste them and rank them, and then I try to taste the top 25 and do it blind on a live stream, which in itself is chaotic. But last year I felt really good about it. I felt really good about how the tasting went on the live stream. There weren't too many screw-ups. We were down 50% on screw-ups. So that was because it was... So a couple of years ago, I had a bunch of buddies do the pouring. Well, guess who was drinking the whole time while they were supposed to be pouring and bringing stuff to me, Yeah, so that was fun. Always a good time, though. Thank you. Yes, sir.
So let's get right to the core of it. What is, for you, what is the key to a good bourbon versus
it's all about
one that sucks?
It kind of goes to the core of who I am. It's like how it feels on my tongue. The more points of the palate that a bourbon will hit, the more powerful it is for me. So when I taste something that I feel on just 2 or 3 spots on my tongue, oh, that's nice, it's good. But when I taste something that's like drenching it like a blanket and curling it underneath and, just feel it everywhere, to me, that is a separator. And it's also like when you put your focus on how does a whiskey feel on your tongue versus the tasting of it, you can take out a lot of subjectivity. Okay, so y'all probably been following me for a while. That I love the taste of marzipan. Marzipan is delicious, great, and people are like, you don't even, what the hell is marzipan? Down in Kentucky, everyone was making fun of me, like, what's marzipan? I'm like, man, I was in France and they just sliced me off some marzipan. You go to Italy, it's all over Europe. You go to any bakery, they'll have marzipan. It's delicious. But if I taste marzipan in something and I just focus on the things that I like and taste, that's going to the front of the line every single time. But if I take out what I like and put it on the simple principle of where do I feel it on my tongue and how many places do I feel it on my tongue, then I'm taking out as much as I can the personal bias. So if I'm tasting cinnamon, pepper, caramel, vanilla, I got all these things on one bourbon and it's all over my tongue, and then I taste marzipan on one part of my tongue on the other hand, if this is just me picking for me, I might lean marzipan, and that'll be ahead of it. But if I go with my standards of like how many points of the palate do I feel it, the one over here that has the more concentration on my tongue, that'll beat that one every time. So it's the best. Being a critic, it's not perfect. You try to be as subjective as you can, but that has been what has worked for me over the years.
Maybe that's a good segue into doing the tasting, or you want to take
we got one question.
Okay, hold on.
Wait,
hold on a second so everyone can hear your question.
Okay, I just wanted to know, do you recommend flavored whiskeys, or would you just go with a great quality whiskey that's not flavored? Because when I cook or make, baked goods, that's usually when I use it. and they're always pushing the flavored ones.
It's because they want to make money. Yeah, the flavored whiskeys, they're cheaper to make, and they do really well in colleges. Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're not high quality. What do you like to cook with bourbon? I'm curious.
Irish fruit cake, and so of course I want the best, what's going to taste the best, because I poke holes in it and pour the whiskey in. So what would you recommend for that?
It's funny. Like, so you would think you'd want like some Irish whiskey for that, but Irish whiskey, is fantastic for sipping. I don't know if I've seen a lot of good recipes with Irish whiskey. You see more recipes with bourbon because it's sweeter, and so bourbons tend to be sweet. This may be sacrilegious to some, but I think Woodford would go really well with that because it has like some banana. Did you say banana something? Is there banana in that? There's no banana? Dried fruit? Okay. Yeah, okay, not Woodford then. I thought you'd said banana. Southern. All right, so we'll go Southern fruit cake. How about some Elijah Craig? Go get Elijah Craig. Yeah, I think that'll be good there.
Okay, last question.
Just wondering, from drinking rather than as a taste test, ice, a little bit of water. Is there anything is wrong to do, or?
Well, there's when I'm doing a tasting, it depends on what it's for. If it's an analytical taste, which by the way, I will need one of those too up here. I mean, I didn't get a confirmation that we don't have alcohol police in here, so I can't open this bottle here legally and pour it for myself. Oh, thank you. So, all right. So, what was the question again? I kind of got. All right, yeah, I see. Okay, so if I'm tasting analytically, I taste it how it's in the bottle. Okay, so like by that I mean like if I'm doing a ranking series on the tasting, then I need to taste it how it's been bottled. If it is with my friends, I might throw some ice in there. Like, there's the work tasting in my brain, and then there's hanging out smoking cigars with my friends, and that's ice, water, just whatever I'm in the mood for. But if you want to be down and dirty and get really serious about tasting, and maybe one day be a professional taster, you got to be able to do all of it. And if you want to go down that path, do a flight, blind, no water or anything added, taste through it. And then when you kind of have like, if you have a tie, say you have 5 bourbons that you're tasting blind, which means you don't know what has been poured for you. And you have a tie between 2 of them, your tiebreaker could be which one is better with water. So that's how I do it. But if you're just out having fun with friends, or you got a gathering going, enjoying yourself, drink it however you like. I would just recommend, if you are going to add Coke to it, don't use an expensive bottle for that. If you want to use Pappy Van Winkle with Coke, hey, that's your prerogative. But I don't got that kind of bankroll. I'm just saying, Jim Beam's just fine for that. You don't be spending that kind of money. Okay, so who's ready for a proper tasting here? Y'all ready? Okay, just a reminder, this is not a fraternity party, so let's not kick it back, all right? I know there's a temptation there, but the journey of a tasting begins by analyzing the color. As I was telling this gentleman up front here, bourbon must always go into a new charred oak barrel. And by the way, this is what we're tasting right here. We're tasting Four Roses 1920. Full preparation for those. This is 115 proof. So, Old Forester 1920. What did I say? Did I say Four Roses 1920? Well, we also had Four Roses on the menu, but we're doing 1920. Thank you for that. So this is Old Forester 1920, 115 proof. But when we're tasting when we're doing a bourbon tasting, first thing we're going to do is analyze the color. So when it went into the barrel, it was clear as the water from your tap. So once it's distilled, it doesn't look like this. This is years of being in the barrel. And being in that barrel, it's moving in and out of the wood, extracting all of that color and the majority of the aromas and flavors. And then you want to bring it to your nose. And when you smell bourbon, you'll smell with your mouth slightly open. When you do that, you're actually relaxing your olfactory. If you smell it with your mouth closed, you're going to get a big whiff of alcohol. And it's better if you can cycle it out. Even for someone like me who tastes all the time, I still smell with my mouth open. And then the other thing, you're going to go side by side. Your nostrils do not work in unison. They cycle. So one side, you'll notice that you pick up certain smells, and you'll pick up other things on the other side. And if you've ever broken your nose or, had something happen to your nose, or maybe you have long COVID, focusing on your nostrils can help open you up a little bit. So that's a very important thing to remember. The reason why we smell alcohol is there's bad alcohol all over the world. There are people who will go to the Dominican Republic and find out that there's fake alcohol in their minibar. Now, typically, they're drinking at about 3 o'clock in the morning after they've already had a night. But if they smelled it, they'd probably smell things like turpentine and things like that. But there's fake bootlegged alcohol all over the world, and if you smell it, there's a few things to look for. Turpentine, kerosene, dirty armpits. Seriously, if you smell dirty armpits in something, do not drink it, okay? I mean, even if that's your thing, don't drink it, okay? And bleach, because these people who make fake alcohol, they don't care about it tasting good, okay? I'm occasionally on a show called Moonshiners. Y'all ever seen that show? So they used to bring me in to taste stuff, and when the reruns are going, I'll occasionally have a moonshiner show up at my house, which I never know how they get my address, but they come up with a jar, like, "Hey, will you taste my shine?" And oh yeah, I'll taste it. I'll smell it. I'm like, "Nope, not tasting that." So your smell can actually help you not drink bad alcohol. After that, you're kind of things that you buy in the store. That's probably not going to happen. But when the next thing is you're looking for areas of what does it fall in? Is it sweet? Is it earthy? Is it spicy? Is it fruity? Is it oaky? You go down all these paths. And then after that, you're say you think it's floral, then you start saying, okay, what kind of flower is that? And you start kind of narrowing it down more and more and more. Now that's the nosing part of it. And to me, nosing is a lot of fun. You can get a lot out of nosing whiskey, and it will change as your palate gets more, or your nose gets more acclimated to it. But you're also preparing your palate for what you're about to taste. So anytime you're doing any kind of spirits tasting, and really wine too, you should spend a lot of time smelling it. Now, it can come off weird in a crowded bar, and everyone's pounded Keystone Light or something like that. Well, we don't care what other people think. Just do what you want to do. So the next part is the taste mindfulness stuff. And what I would like you to do is I would like you to put about a thimble-size amount on your tongue. So we're not taking a shot. We're not taking the full shot. We're just putting a little bit on our tongue, and we want to focus on what part of the tongue do we feel it most prominently. And here's the 5 areas I want you to focus on. Tip of the tongue, middle toward the back, all the way in the back, or on the sides. Cheers. Now, we're not thinking about flavors. We're not thinking about that tastes like banana. Or it tastes like this. I hear a lot of coughing, too. So that'll cure the cold that's, might be floating around. Who felt it on the tip of the tongue? Who felt it in the middle? There's a little line there, middle toward the back. Anybody feel it there? Anybody feel it all the way in the back? Okay. Anyone feel it on the sides? Who felt it? Who feels it in their chest? That's the Kentucky hug. Okay, so here's the part about taste mindfulness. It's very important. Here we're trying to connect your brain to your palate with what you just tasted. So what I would like you to do, I'd like you to put the same amount of whiskey on your palate and focus on where you felt it most prominently. And let's see if some flavors come to you. Here we go. Okay, this is a very studious group here. Y'all are taking this very serious. I like it. Sometimes I got people who are like, trying to sneak in another drink. They're like, I don't care about this. I just want the bourbon. I just want to drink the bourbon, But, all right, so for those who raised their hand, said they felt it on the tip of the tongue, anybody have a flavor that they want to call out? Vanilla, cinnamon, cherry, banana. Fantastic. We have 4 different flavors there, all in one part of the tongue, the tip of the tongue. Cinnamon and vanilla are pretty far apart, right? That's the beautiful thing about tasting. We all taste differently. We all feel things differently on our tongue. So I tell people all the time, like, I am a critic. I put my notes out there. I talk about things I like and don't like, but I never, ever, ever tell you what you should taste. Never. Because only you can taste for you, right? This is like tasting education. The more you know about what you like and how your palate works, the more you can select for yourself versus someone telling you what you should be tasting. And that's probably one of the big reasons why I pulled out a wine a little bit, is that wine tends to be like, oh, you should be tasting this, this, and this, and this. And I know I look like a snob because I wear ascots. But the truth is, I'm the farthest thing from it. And I would love for everyone to be able to train their palates to taste and feel on their tongue like I've been able to do. Because my belief is the more we know how to taste, the more we know about a product, the less alcoholism we'll have out there. Because I do not want to sit at home and drink on my couch. I want to taste. I want to learn. And the more you get into this world of tasting and going down the rabbit hole of bourbon, it turns out you can max out a credit card real quick, but it's a lot of fun, and you make a lot of friends. All right, let's go to the middle of the palate. Who felt it on the middle of the palate wants to call out what they tasted? Yes, sir. You got cinnamon on the middle of the palate. Maple syrup. Nice. Caramel. Dried raisin? Okay. Toast? Rye toast or sourdough toast? Butter? Honey? I mean, what we got going on here? Or is this avocado toast? All the above. I love it. All right. All right. There's a little line between the middle part of your tongue and the back. You feel very uniquely there. Anybody feel back there and want to call it? Yes, sir. Licorice. Oh, boy. Almond. Oh, nice. Couple bitterness lines there. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am. What's that? As in the soft drink. Oh, oak. I thought you said Coke. Listen, cocaine does come up every now and then at these things, so I had to just double check. Never been, never know at my events. You didn't look like a cocaine dealer, but you never know. But oak is something I'm very sensitive to as well. Like people like these really old bourbons like Pappy 23, and then people will spend like $5,000 on a bottle. And to me, it tastes like licking a fence, an oak fence. Like I do not like that, So I'm with you. I definitely taste some oak in there. All right, who felt it all the way in the back and wants to call it out? Earth. Grainy. Spicy. Okay. Very good. And who felt it on the sides of the tongue that wanted to? Yes, sir. You felt caramel on the sides. Fantastic. Banana. Okay. All right, anyone else? Licorice. You see how we have a lot of the same notes getting thrown around, but we're feeling them on the different parts of our tongue. Isn't that awesome? We're all different. We all feel things differently on our tongue. And so the last part of a tasting is how long do you still feel it on your tongue? Anyone still feel it on there? That is the finish. That's the finish. And so that's kind of how I do my tastings and how I've done them over the years. It's been an absolute pleasure teaching you all how to do that today. And now you can go out and have a party over at your house and go through that same technique and hopefully pay it forward, and more people will become tasters and enjoy bourbon instead of just drinking it straight from the bottle or a Listerine bottle. You know what I'm saying? But it's been a real pleasure. Thank you all so much for having me today. I'm truly honored that you all came to see me. And if I have one last thing I could say, vodka sucks. Thank you very much.